I never thought a pillow could change my life, but here we are. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment I walked into that cramped dorm room at Wilderness Camp and saw him for the first time. His name was Miles, and he was sitting on the bottom bunk, tying his hiking boots with this concentrated expression that made him look like he was solving a complex equation. Dark hair falling into his eyes, strong hands working the laces with practiced efficiency. When he looked up at me, his smile was easy and genuine, the kind that reaches all the way to the eyes and makes you feel like maybe this summer won't be so bad after all. I'm Reed, by the way, 22 years old and supposedly here to work as a junior counselor at this environmental education camp in the Cascades. Really, I was running from a breakup with my girlfriend of 3 years, and the uncomfortable realization that the relationship had felt more like a friendship for most of its duration. My best friend had pushed me to take this job, said I needed to clear my head, find myself, all that cliché stuff people say when they're trying to help. Turns out, he was more right than either of us could have imagined. Miles stood up to shake my hand, and I noticed he was exactly my height, which was oddly comforting. His grip was firm, warm, calloused in a way that suggested he actually knew his way around the outdoors, unlike me with my borrowed hiking boots and brand-new backpack that still had the tag stuffed in the side pocket. "That's the top bunk if you want it," he said, gesturing upward. "Or we can flip a coin. I don't really care either way." "I'll take the top," I told him, already feeling self-conscious about my lack of camping experience. Didn't want to seem difficult on day one. The room was barely big enough for the bunk bed, 2 small dressers, and a narrow path between them. We'd be living in each other's space for the next 10 weeks, and I found myself hoping he wasn't the type to snore or leave wet towels everywhere. Small concerns, normal roommate stuff. I had no idea how much more complicated things would become. That first night, I discovered that the camp had apparently bought their mattresses and pillows from some discount supplier who valued profit over comfort. My pillow was thin as a pancake, lumpy, and smelled vaguely of mildew. I folded it in half and tried to make it work, but I'm a side sleeper, and without proper support, my neck was already protesting. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the forest outside our window, Miles's steady breathing from below, and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. The next morning, my neck was stiff and I was exhausted. Miles noticed immediately as I climbed down from the bunk, wincing. "You okay?" he asked, already dressed in his camp staff shirt and cargo pants, looking unfairly alert for 6 in the morning. "Yeah, just didn't sleep great." "I'll adjust." He gave me this look, thoughtful and assessing, but didn't push it. We headed to breakfast together, and I started to learn who Miles was. He'd grown up in Montana, spent his summers working on his uncle's ranch, knew the names of trees and birds and constellations. He had this quiet confidence about him, never showing off his knowledge but sharing it easily when asked. He was studying environmental science, planning to work for the National Park Service eventually. When he talked about the wilderness, his whole face lit up with this genuine passion that was kind of mesmerizing to watch. I found myself watching him a lot that first week. Just observing, I told myself. Getting to know my roommate. The way he interacted with the kids at camp. Patient and encouraging. How he'd pause mid-conversation to identify a bird call. The unconscious habit he had of pushing his hair back when he was thinking. Normal roommate stuff, right? Just being friendly. By the 3rd night, I was miserable. The combination of physical labor, early mornings, and terrible sleep was catching up with me. I'd wake up multiple times each night, trying to find a comfortable position, my neck aching. I tried not to toss and turn too much, didn't want to disturb Miles, but the bunk frame creaked with every movement. On the 4th morning, I came back from the showers to find Miles sitting on his bunk, holding both pillows, mine and his. "This is ridiculous," he said without preamble. "You're not sleeping, which means I'm not sleeping because I can hear you moving around all night. Take my pillow." "I can't take your pillow," I protested. Then you'll be uncomfortable. Reed, look at me. He waited until I met his eyes. I grew up sleeping on hay bales in my uncle's barn when we worked late during calving season. I once fell asleep sitting upright against a fence post. I can sleep anywhere, on anything. You clearly cannot. Take the damn pillow. There was something about the way he said it, firm but caring, that made arguing seem pointless. I took the pillow. It was noticeably thicker than mine, actually had some support to it, smelled clean with a hint of whatever laundry detergent he used. That night, I slept better than I had since arriving. When I woke up in the morning, actually rested for the first time, I felt this weird emotion I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, obviously, but something else underneath it. Something warm and unsettling. Thank you, I said as we got ready for the day. Seriously, that was really kind of you. Miles just shrugged, but he was smiling. Told you I'd sleep better knowing you were comfortable. And I did. Something about that phrase stuck with me. He'd sleep better knowing I was comfortable. It suggested a level of care that went beyond normal roommate courtesy, didn't it? Or was I reading too much into a simple act of kindness? I didn't know, and I didn't let myself think about it too hard. The days fell into a rhythm. We'd wake early, lead our respective groups of teenagers through hiking trips, wilderness survival lessons, environmental education. The work was exhausting but satisfying. Miles and I developed an easy companionship, the kind that forms when you're living in close quarters and working toward the same goals. We'd debrief our days during the evening free time, sitting on the porch of our cabin, watching the sun set behind the mountains. He made me laugh, which surprised me. Miles had this dry, subtle sense of humor that would catch me off guard. He'd deliver some deadpan observation about one of the other counselors, or a ridiculous question a camper had asked, and I'd find myself cracking up, sometimes laughing so hard I'd have to wipe tears from my eyes. I like that, he said one evening after I'd recovered from one of these laughing fits. Like what? Your laugh. It's completely unguarded. Most people have this controlled, polite laugh they use in public. Yours is just pure and genuine. It's nice. I felt heat rise to my face, grateful for the dim light that might hide my blush. I wasn't used to being observed so carefully, having these small details about myself noticed and appreciated. It made me hyper-aware of him in return. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was amused, how he'd absently rub the back of his neck when he was tired, the surprising gentleness in his hands when he was showing a kid how to properly hold a compass or identify a plant. We started spending more time together beyond just sharing a room. We'd volunteer for the same activities, coordinate our schedules so we could take meals together. It felt natural, easy. I told myself we were just becoming good friends. That's what this was. Friendship. But then there were moments that felt like something else entirely. Like the time we took a group of campers on an overnight backpacking trip. Miles and I were setting up our tent while the kids worked on theirs under the supervision of another counselor. The tent was small, barely enough room for 2 sleeping bags side by side. We'd be sleeping closer to each other than we did in our bunk beds. This is cozy, I said, trying to sound casual. Miles glanced at me, and there was something in his expression I couldn't read. Yeah, it is. That okay with you? Of course. Why wouldn't it be? He held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary. No reason. Just checking. That night, lying in my sleeping bag with Miles just inches away, I was intensely aware of every sound he made, every shift of his body. I could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool mountain air. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed about reaching across that small space between us, though I couldn't remember the details when I woke. The morning was awkward in a way I couldn't explain. We'd somehow ended up closer together during the night, and I woke to find my face near his shoulder, close enough that I could have counted his breaths. I extracted myself carefully, hoping he was still asleep. But when I glanced back, his eyes were open, watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. We didn't talk about it. Around the 6th week of camp, I started noticing things about myself that I'd been carefully not noticing, like how my heart would speed up when Miles walked into a room, how I'd find excuses to be near him, to touch his arm when I was making a point, or sit close enough that our shoulders would brush, how I'd catch myself staring at his hands, his profile, the curve of his mouth when he smiled. I'd had crushes before, obviously, but those had all been on women, and they'd felt different somehow, less consuming. This thing with Miles was taking up more and more space in my head, and I didn't know what to do with it. One evening, we were alone in the cabin, both reading in comfortable silence. I was on my bunk, he was on his, and I kept glancing down at him over the edge of my book, unable to focus on the words on the page. "Read," he said suddenly, and I nearly dropped the book. "Can I ask you something personal?" My heart started pounding. "Sure. Have you ever questioned your sexuality?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and significant. I could have deflected, could have lied, could have asked why he wanted to know. Instead, I found myself being honest. "Recently, yeah, I have." He was quiet for a moment, and I wished I could see his face, read his expression. What brought that on? I think I've been lying to myself for a while, about what I want, who I'm attracted to. I paused, gathering courage. "What about you?" "I came out as bi when I was 19, he said, his voice matter-of-fact. Took me a while to figure it out, but once I did, everything made more sense. My family was mostly okay with it. My uncle, the one with the ranch, he's gay. So I had someone who understood. I processed this information, my mind racing. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you might need to hear it, that it's okay to question, to be uncertain, to discover new things about yourself, and because I wanted you to know that you're safe with me, whatever you're figuring out. I climbed down from my bunk and sat on the edge of his, facing him. He sat up, and we were close now, knees almost touching. The lamp cast warm light across his face, and I could see every detail, the sincerity in his eyes. What if I'm figuring out that I have feelings for someone I shouldn't have feelings for? I said quietly. Why shouldn't you? Because he's my roommate. Because we have to live together for 4 more weeks. Because if I'm wrong about what I'm feeling, or if he doesn't feel the same way, I'll have ruined a friendship I really value. Miles reached out and took my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. Reed, you're not wrong about what you're feeling, and you haven't ruined anything. How do you know what I'm feeling? Because I'm feeling it too. Have been for weeks. Why do you think I gave you my pillow? The confession hung between us, fragile and precious. I looked at our joined hands, then back at his face, and saw everything I'd been too scared to hope for, reflected in his expression. You sleep better knowing I'm comfortable, I said, echoing his words from weeks ago. Yeah, he said softly, because I care about you. More than I probably should, given the circumstances. But I can't seem to help it. I closed the remaining distance between us, and kissing Miles felt like the most natural thing in the world. His lips were soft, his hand came up to cup my face, and everything else fell away. There was just this moment, this connection, this feeling of rightness that I'd never experienced before. When we pulled apart, I was breathing hard, my heart racing for entirely different reasons now. Okay, I said. Wow. Okay. Miles laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. Good wow or bad wow? Definitely good wow. Really good wow. Can we do that again? We did, and it was even better the second time. And the third. We stayed up half the night, talking and kissing, and figuring out what this meant, what we wanted it to mean. Miles told me about his first boyfriend in college, the relationship that had helped him understand himself. I told him about my ex-girlfriend, how I'd cared about her, but never felt the spark that everyone talked about. How I'd thought maybe I just wasn't a passionate person, that maybe that kind of intense attraction was exaggerated in movies and books. Turns out I just hadn't met the right person yet, I said, and Miles smiled against my lips. The next few weeks were both wonderful and challenging. We had to be discreet at camp, professional in front of the other counselors and the kids. But in our cabin, in those private moments, we could just be ourselves. We'd stay up late talking about everything and nothing. He'd read to me from the field guides he loved, teaching me to identify plants and animals. I'd tell him stories about growing up in the suburbs, so different from his rural Montana childhood. We learned each other's habits, preferences, fears. I discovered that Miles was ticklish behind his knees, that he liked his coffee with too much sugar, that he had a recurring anxiety dream about getting lost in the wilderness without a map. He learned that I hummed when I was concentrating, that I always put my left shoe on before my right, that I'd never seen the ocean despite growing up only a few hours from the coast. The physical attraction was intense, but it was the emotional intimacy that really got me. The way he'd check in with me after a difficult day, reading my mood without me having to say anything. How he'd leave little notes in my backpack for me to find during the day, just simple things like thinking of you or you've got this. The way he'd absently play with my fingers while we talked, tracing patterns on my palm. I was falling in love with him, and it was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. One night, about 2 weeks before camp ended, we were lying in his bunk together, squeezed into the narrow space, my head on his chest. His fingers were running through my hair, and I was drifting in that comfortable space between waking and sleeping. "Read," he said softly, and I hummed in acknowledgement. What happens when camp ends? The question I'd been avoiding thinking about. I don't know. What do you want to happen? I want to keep seeing you. I want to figure out how to make this work. I know you're in Seattle and I'm in Missoula, but that's not impossible. People do long distance. I lifted my head to look at him. You'd want to try that. Long distance is hard. You're worth hard, he said simply. This is worth hard. Unless you don't feel the same way, in which case, forget I said anything and we can just enjoy these last 2 weeks. I do feel the same way. I'm just scared. This is all so new to me. Being with a guy, being this serious about someone, all of it. What if I mess it up? Then we'll figure it out together. Reed, I'm not expecting you to have everything figured out. I just need to know if you want to try. I kissed him instead of answering, pouring everything I felt into it. When we broke apart, he was smiling. I'll take that as a yes, he said. Definitely yes. The last 2 weeks of camp passed too quickly. We made plans, exchanged contact information for our real lives outside this bubble we'd been living in. Miles would finish his degree in the spring, and he was already looking at job opportunities in the Pacific Northwest. Seattle wasn't out of the question. In the meantime, we'd visit when we could, video chat, make it work. On the last night, we packed up our cabin, and I found myself getting emotional about leaving this small room that had become so significant to us. This was where we'd figured everything out, where I'd discovered this part of myself I hadn't known existed. Miles found me standing there, holding his pillow, the one he'd given me that 4th night. Keep it, he said. Something to remember me by. Like I could forget you. He pulled me into his arms, and we stood there for a long moment, just holding each other. Thank you, I said into his shoulder. For the pillow, for your patience, for helping me figure myself out. For everything. Thank you for letting me in. For trusting me. For taking a chance on this. We left camp the next morning, driving away in separate cars but with promises to see each other soon. I watched him disappear in my rearview mirror, and instead of feeling sad, I felt hopeful. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. That was 3 months ago. We've made the long-distance thing work better than I ever thought possible. Miles drives to Seattle once a month. I've flown to Missoula twice. We video chat almost every night, falling asleep on the phone together more often than not. He's applying for jobs near me, and I'm starting to look at grad programs in Montana. We're figuring it out. I still have his pillow. It's on my bed right now, and I sleep on it every night. Sometimes, when I'm missing him particularly badly, I'll hold it close and remember that first week of camp, how a simple act of kindness started everything. How caring about someone's comfort, wanting them to sleep well, to be happy, can be its own kind of love language. My friends have noticed the change in me. I'm happier, more confident, more settled in my own skin. Coming out to them was easier than I expected, probably because I was so sure about Miles, about us. My parents took a little longer to come around, but they're trying, and I know they will get there. Sometimes I think about that version of me who walked into that cabin on the first day of camp, running from a failed relationship and a life that didn't quite fit. I wish I could tell him that everything was about to change, that he was about to meet someone who would see him, really see him, and care enough to give up his own comfort to make sure he slept well. That a pillow would become a symbol of something much bigger, much more important. Love isn't always dramatic confessions and grand gestures. Sometimes it's quiet and simple. Sometimes it's someone noticing you're uncomfortable and doing something about it. Sometimes it's staying up late talking about nothing important. Sometimes it's the steady certainty that this person, right here, is worth fighting for, worth the distance and the difficulty and the fear. Miles is coming to visit this weekend. We're going to cook dinner together in my tiny apartment kitchen, probably get in each other's way and laugh about it. We'll watch a movie neither of us really cares about because we'll be too busy stealing kisses and making plans for the future. And at the end of the night, we'll fall asleep together, and it won't matter whose pillow is whose because we'll have each other. I never thought a pillow could change my life, but it did. Or maybe it wasn't really about the pillow at all. Maybe it was about someone caring enough to notice what I needed, caring enough to give up something of his own to make my life a little better. Maybe it was about being seen and valued and chosen. All I know is that I'm grateful for that uncomfortable camp mattress that started everything, for Miles's observation and generosity, for the courage to explore feelings I'd been suppressing, for finding someone who makes me want to be braver, more honest, more myself. That's the thing about love, I guess. It shows up in unexpected ways, in unexpected places, with unexpected people. You just have to be open enough to recognize it when it arrives. And sometimes it arrives in the form of a guy giving you his pillow and saying he'll sleep better knowing you're comfortable. Best pillow I ever had.